kindness from people. That's the deep tragedy of his life. He feels he's never lived up to what was expected of him, what his genius IQ presaged, and therefore doesn't deserve to be liked, let alone loved. I've now read A Gay and Melancholy Sound at least a dozen times more. My memory is that originally I couldn't bear to give the book back to the library, so I simply kept it. But knowing my, even then, reverence for libraries and what they stand for, perhaps that memory is apocryphal. More likely, I just kept checking it out over and over for those 2 unhappy years I spent at Annapolis. But somehow, I did end up with a copy of the novel, which I treasured until it fell apart from too many rereadings. A Gay and Melancholy Sound is certainly grounded in the great historical events of the 20th century, the Second World War and McCarthyism, to take 2 notable examples. Yet Miller's novel never feels dated or awkward. There's no strong whiff of the long-dead past emanating from its pages. Indeed, there's enough snark, emotional pain, and irony to satisfy even the most demanding 21st century reader. Early in 1971, 10 years after A Gay and Melancholy Sound was published, and 2 years after the Stonewall riots marked the beginning of the modern gay pride movement, Miller very publicly came out, writing an article for the New York Times Magazine entitled What It Means to Be a Homosexual. In it, he described the pain of inhabiting his theretofore well-closeted life. Knowing that Miller was a gay man gave my rereadings of the 1970s and 1980s an added depth and poignancy. Joshua Bland in A Gay and Melancholy Sound sounds an awful lot like Miller in the article. I could only wonder about the extent to which Miller's A Gay and Melancholy Sound was not only novel as autobiography, but also autobiography, at least emotional autobiography, as novel. That magazine piece was later published in book form under the title On Being Different. Wonderfully and serendipitously, it's going to be reissued by Penguin Classics in 2012. For decades, though, A Gay and Melancholy Sound has been nearly impossible to find. It never attained the status of a classic, so most libraries had long since weeded it from their collections. In all my searching, I'd only ever found one copy, about 6 years ago. It was at Renaissance Books, a used bookstore in Milwaukee's Mitchell International Airport. Naturally, I immediately bought it. When I was writing Book Lust Recommended Reading for Every Mood, Moment, and Reason in 2002, it had been at least a decade since I'd gone back to Miller's novel. I knew I wanted to include it, but worried that readers of Book Lust wouldn't find it as compelling as I remembered it being, or perhaps fearing not being as fond of it as I once was, I hedged my bets and listed it in a section called Better Remembered Than Reread. Now, having reread it in order to make sure I wanted to include it in the Book Lust Rediscoveries series, I see how foolish I was not to trust that earlier me, who found so much to admire and love in Miller's witty, smart, and viscerally powerful novel. My favorite anecdote about my ongoing love for Merle Miller's novels took place in 1967. My husband and I had gotten a job with the University of Michigan's Institute for Social Research, along with almost 24 other young married couples, to be part of a national study of undetected juvenile delinquency. Our assignment was to interview teens about crimes they may have committed that never went onto a police report. A roll of the dice determined where we were to be sent. In our case, it was to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Chicago, and a few small towns in Iowa. By this time, I had read all of Miller's novels, but I was dying to own them as well, and even back then they were very hard to come by. I noticed that one of the Iowa towns we were assigned to was not too far from Marshalltown, where Miller had grown up. I felt sure that any bookstore in that town would feature a complete complement of his books, new and older, since he was a native son who had, at least in my mind, gone on to fame and fortune. So one sunny afternoon we drove to Marshalltown and went into the bookstore. My conversation with